everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're here with Dr. Kevin Maas from Idaho Reproductive Center. And I to explain a little bit more about what he does as a reproductive endocrinologist and infertility specialist, and also his personal story. Dr. Maas, welcome. And
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
it is a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time. So I would love to start by learning more about what you do and how you choose to go into this amazing field.
Sure. My name's Kevin Maas. I'm one of the physicians at the Idaho Center for Reproductive Medicine. I am board certified in obstetrics gynecology and subspecialty certified in reproductive endocrinology and fertility. I decided to go into this field for a few reasons. When you do medical school, as part of the training, you get kind of a taste tester of a lot of different fields: general surgery, psychiatry, internal medicine. Um, I found that I gravitated to OB-GYN partly because it's probably the only field I feel that's a good blend of general medicine and surgery. So as an OB-GYN, you take care, the patients are your patients. A lot of times you may be their primary care provider, but when the issue becomes a surgical issue, you're also the surgeon that helps take care of it. So it's probably the only field where you really kind of encompass like a whole broad spectrum of care. Um, in terms of the world infertility and reproductive endocrinology, um, I have a pretty strong science background. I did a PhD in immunology, so I like kind of very basic science driven fields. Um, and I feel like of all the fields of medicine, this field is one where there's a lot of cutting edge technology, innovations translate very quickly into potential therapeutic options. The patients as a whole are very motivated. They're very invested in the process. They want to have success. You don't necessarily find that in all medical fields. Sometimes it's an uphill battle getting people to change lifestyle and all this. Most of the patients in the fertility world have a very vested interest in this working and will do everything within their power. So you have patients who are very, very vested in the process. And the outcomes, if you have success, you help someone build their family. What's better than that? So I think it's kind of a combination of just the OB-GYN field in general and some of the unique aspects of that, but also, the fact that this is a very science driven field and it's something where you're helping people build families. So yeah,
Like you said, what can be better than that, right?
exactly.
I hear you. I hear you because that's what we do, what we do. And but when you entered this field, you had no idea that you would need to use the help of a reproductive to create your own family. So you mind sharing more about your personal story?
Yeah, absolutely. So, those are the reasons. So I went into the field, I didn't go into the field because of my fertility struggles. It was more after the fact that we found out that, we had problems too. I think a lot of these fertility struggles are a lot more common than people realize. Probably somewhere between 10 to 25% of couples have fertility problems. It's just something that's really personal that people don't talk about or share a lot. Um, my wife and we'd been trying probably on and off for about 4 or 5 years before I even started my subspecialty fellowship training. But we're like, oh, well, it's just, we've been busy and, it's not, not super effective trying. And, but at some point, uh, we felt like, okay, we probably should get evaluated. There's a point where, okay, there's something's going on. Um, and so we went through the basic fertility evaluation, with the physicians at my fellowship program. And during the evaluation, we found out that my wife had really low egg supply, um, which, it's not always a problem, but when it is a problem, it can be a very difficult problem to overcome. Um, a lot of fertility medications work by getting women, the less aggressive treatments get women to ovulate more than one egg. The most aggressive treatments, like in vitro fertilization, try and get women to ovulate from as many eggs as possible. Um, in a lot of cases, that can work quite well, but especially when a woman's egg supply is low, and especially when it's really low, it can be a challenge to get a good response to the medications. So, when we did our initial evaluation and found out that this was the problem, I already had background in the field and this could be a challenge. So that day after our initial consultation, we talked, like, what are we okay with? What are we not okay with in terms of building our family? And, we decided we want to try IVF. We wanted to be more aggressive given that the egg supply was a concern. Um, we also taught, I explained to her, like, with a low egg supply, sometimes having success with IVF can be a challenge. And if it doesn't work, what do we do next? Are we okay with using donor eggs where another woman goes through an IVF cycle? We fertilize the eggs and my wife carries the resulting pregnancy. Do we use donated embryos? Do we think about adoption? And just move forward that way? Or do we just decide that, okay, we've tried and maybe having kids isn't in the cards for us? After that initial evaluation and us taking time to talk about it, we decided, we want to try IVF, but if IVF didn't work, we wanted to use an egg donor. My wife, I think it was very important for her to go through the experience of carrying a child and seeing what that was. I think that was something that was very important for her. Um, so we ultimately ended up doing 7 IVF cycles, but we didn't have success. It just, it was hard. We'd get 1, 2, 3 eggs at the time of egg retrieval, which is a low number. And when the numbers are that low, things have to go perfectly. All of them have to fertilize. All the fertilized eggs have to make it to a blastocyst. Those are a day 5, day 6 embryo. Those are the embryos that can be tested. Those are the embryos a lot of times are what are transferred to a woman's uterus to help her get pregnant. But, I'd say out of the 7 cycles we did, I think we had 2 cycles where we got 1 embryo and, just really didn't have success with the ongoing pregnancy. So after that, we were already prepared that this was a possibility. And so we talked and decided that we wanted to move forward with egg donor. Um, my wife is pure Japanese and we were in the Boise area. There's not a lot of Japanese donors. Um, we ended up talking with a sister clinic, who, had some Japanese donors. I think my wife, she felt like if she couldn't contribute biologically, she at least wanted to preserve some of that cultural kind of connection. So I think having a Japanese donor was important for her. Um, so they had maybe like 4 or 5 Japanese donors. Ironically, I think we chose the donor that was the least Japanese out of all of them. Like she's quarter Japanese. It actually ended up being the personality profile for the egg donor that my wife really liked. Um, when you use a donor, uh, either donor agencies or clinics that have their own donor programs will have profiles where you can kind of look at their basic medical information, their family medical history. A lot of times you can get genetic information. And a lot of times the donors will fill out profiles so you get a sense of the personalities. And it was that personality profile that my wife really kind of resonated with her. And I think was the final decision for why we chose to go forward with the donor that we went with. Um, the donor went through an IVF cycle for us. We ended up getting about 25 eggs. We ended up with about 9 embryos from that process. Um, the embryos were day 5, day 6 blastocysts. Um, you can do what's called PGT testing on the embryos. It's where you biopsy the precursor for the placenta, and you can send that biopsy off to a company which will extract the chromosomal material and tell you which of the embryos are chromosomally normal. We figured we had enough bad luck. If there's anyone that could have bad luck with this, it'd probably be us. So we wanted all the information. So we did PGT testing. Um, we got 9 blastocysts. Out of the 9, 5 of them were chromosomally normal. We got 3 boys, 2 girls. Um, that were chromosomally normal. And so we decided to transfer the best quality male embryo to my wife. And fortunately, she got pregnant with the first transfer. And she was actually one of the embryologists in our clinic. So she's got a PhD in cell and developmental biology, and she is a trained embryologist. So she was actually working as an embryologist all the way up to the day before she delivered. And she
Wow.
loved pregnant. Um, and so pregnancy went great. Um, it wasn't until the delivery that we had problems. So our son was breech. And so we decided to have an elective scheduled C-section. Uh, he did well. Came out really healthy, really vigorous, but she had kind of almost like focal apnea of the uterus. A portion of the uterus just wasn't contracting down. It was almost like herniating out and filling up with blood. Um, so the OB team, they did the C-section. They were watching her. They end up kind of closing the incision and watching her a little bit longer, but she continued to have quite a bit of bleeding afterwards. So about 2-3 hours after the C-section, I think given the extent of bleeding that she's having, they basically talked with us, 2 options at this point. We may need to do a hysterectomy, or we could try and do a uterine artery embolization. That's where a radiology team goes through the femoral arteries into the uterine artery, injects gel foam to block blood flow to the uterus to try and see if that can stop the bleeding. So we actually chose that option, and she stopped bleeding, saved her life. Um, and she did well. She's severely anemic after that. But, after that, we still had 4 embryos remaining. She lost probably over half her blood volume. So we just decided, like, if we're going to have another kid, we didn't want to take that kind of a risk again. We knew that we wanted more than 1 kid, but we didn't want to take a risk of her dying or, having an emergency situation in an under uncontrolled circumstances. So that was kind of what made us for our second child think about moving forward with a gestational carrier or using a surrogate.
How
Um,
was that? How soon after the first delivery?
took about, we waited about 3 years. And I'd actually say probably, we talked about it quite a bit. After, like, the first year was difficult. Like she had, it was a kind of a long recovery for her, given kind of the amount of bleeding. And our son had some medical problems. He's doing well now. But I think the other thing is, you know, as much as she loved being pregnant, it was a tough decision to move forward with the gestational carrier. Um, she felt like she had to sacrifice, contributing her genetics to have our son, but it was worth it. She loved being pregnant. Now she felt like now something else was kind of being taken from her. And so it was a pretty emotional, difficult decision for her. Eventually, I think she knew logically what the right answer was. It was more a matter of kind of her heart coming around to it and it feeling right, like the right time. And so it took about 3 years. And then we transferred a female embryo to our surrogate. And now we have a little daughter who's about 3 years old. And so we're grateful
Congratulations.
to
I
have down in the surrogate.
and
What's that?
your son is 6 and your daughter is 3?
He's 7 and she's 3.
Oh my goodness, congratulations. You know, it is so hard, right? Everything you're sharing with me is such a roller coaster of emotions, and to hear that at the end of the day, everything was worth it because you are a happy family and you have your little ones to look after. And that's what the perspective that we try to give the independence that we want with. So what advice would you give them when they are, what advice would you give those considering surrogacy as an option to create their family?
I mean, I think it's, it's all a very personal decision. I think it's something where, it's kind of like us. We had to weigh what our priorities were, what is and what isn't okay with us. I mean, I think, and there's a lot of different reasons why someone may need to use a gestational carrier or surrogate. Um, but at the end of the day, we like for us, we just didn't feel like it was worth putting my wife's life at risk. We knew we wanted to have another kid. We knew that there were surrogates who had very good pregnancy courses, like being pregnant, who wanted to help someone else out. And at the end of the day, we felt like it was worth it. I didn't want to take a risk with losing my wife to have a child when we knew there was a safe option to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, we want mommy to be okay, to look after those kids, right?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of there's sometimes there's genetic or chromosomal reasons why a woman can't carry a pregnancy. Like as good as Western medicine is, there's some medical problems where the mortality rates can be over 50%. Doesn't mean you can't use their genetics, but it means like it might be dangerous for them to carry. Or, you may have patients who've had to have a hysterectomy for medical emergencies or other reasons where, carrying a pregnancy just isn't an option anymore. Um, I've had patients who've had uterine cancer or other medical complications. And, you know, they still have their ovaries and still have their eggs. So making embryos is possible to have a child that's genetically their own, but they have to get the help of someone else to carry the pregnancy. And at the end of the day, if that's, I feel for most of my patients and myself, it's worth it.
Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is. And so that takes me to the next question for you. So, as you're a medical professional working in the reproductive field, and you've had this long journey towards birth. So, how has your own experience shaped the way you work with your patient going through this process?
I mean, I think number one, I'm very open about the struggles my wife and I had. I think a lot of patients, it kind of humanizes you as a medical practitioner. I think people think of, oh, they're just kind of talking down, they're coming from this pedestal, of, like all this training and like but the truth is my wife and I have been through more treatment and done more fertility treatment than 99.5% of my patients. It's very rare that I have patients that have to go through more than what we've gone through. And at the end of the day, I have two kids. It was the choices, you get dealt the problems you have to deal with. You don't necessarily have a choice. You do have a choice on how you choose to approach the problems. And that's a very personal decision. For my wife and I, we knew we wanted to have kids and we're willing to use an egg donor. We're willing to use a surrogate. That may not be the right choice for everyone, but I think it does show my patients that as hard as things can be, depending on what is and isn't okay with you, we can help almost anyone. It just may mean that maybe there's not a lot someone has to do. Maybe there's a lot like my wife and I had to do to build our family. But at the end of the day, we feel it's worth it. We have two beautiful kids. They're crazy. So get ready what you're asking for. But we love them to death. So,
For the next 18 years, but it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I wouldn't change it for the world. I actually went through fertility treatment myself.
really,
When I entered this field, not knowing that I would need help either, right? I went into it. I was fascinated by it. And in parallel, my husband and I were trying to conceive and nothing was working. And so, we um, a checkup. I was told that maybe with artificial insemination, we tried 4 times, didn't work, moved on to IVF. transferring three embryos each time.
Really?
Because I didn't do PGT back. And so, yeah, it took 9 embryos to get to my boy. And then my girl took on the first try. But,
But
when idea that I would need help to get there. And I guess, what I'm trying to say is that it does give you other perspective and more empathy to those going through the process. And it also has helped me on how I educate the people I talk to. How has it influenced the way you educate your patients and when you're discussing their options?
I mean, I think again, it kind of gives me like I think I understand what a lot of the patients go through. It's like um, I try and be as transparent as I can. It's like sometimes medicine doesn't have all the answers. There are a lot of really good options. The success rates with, the less aggressive treatments aren't great, but they're not expensive and they can work for a fair number of patients. Success rates with IVF typically are very good, but there are no 100%. And sometimes you find out things are tougher than, like I have patients sometimes where things look great on paper. Their supply looks really good. Everything looks great. You do less aggressive treatments, things don't work. And that's not that uncommon. But then you go to do IVF and you find out that maybe there's an issue with how the eggs function and there's not egg quality test. You find out when you're doing an IVF cycle that things may be more challenging than you thought. And it wasn't obvious with the initial testing. And it can be really heartbreaking, but it doesn't mean that people can't be parents. It just depends on what's okay with you and what's not okay with you for building your family. And, I usually that's kind of when I share what we've been through. And I think patients appreciate hearing that. I make it clear just because they were the right choices for me doesn't mean that's the right choices for everyone. But I think a lot of times there are options and ways to move forward. It really comes down to what is okay and what's not okay. And what are your priorities for yourself individually and as you as a couple?
Yeah, yeah. And another thing that comes to mind too is being completely new, right? And you and I have gone through the process, and you have the background as a medical professional, but for people that are still learning. They're still learning about their options. They're still learning about fertility treatments, surrogacy. That is another whole different world. What would you say are the most important questions to ask their fertility physician when they are weighing in their options?
I mean, I think it would be, I think just from a general fertility perspective, I think patients should understand what the labs mean, like what are the basic parts of the evaluation, and different types of diagnoses carry different types of prognostic implications. Like some fertility problems are not that difficult to treat. Some problems, like problems with egg supply, especially as women get older, can be a lot more challenging to treat. I think it's really important for patients to have realistic expectations of what the potential outcomes are going to be. Treatments with Clomid, letrozole, time insemination don't have real high success rates, but they're not that expensive. And I think it's a reasonable place to start, but it may not work. And IVF, depending on what the problem is, can be very effective, but it's not always effective. And, transfers don't always work. And sometimes we don't know why they're not working. And that's another point where maybe a surrogate comes in. We understand, I think, as a field pretty well what makes a good embryo, what's chances of success with a chromosomally normal embryo. I don't think as a field we understand all the events that go into implantation. And there are some patients that, again, look great on paper, but we either have problems building up their lining or just the transfers. Even if great quality chromosomally normal embryos don't work, there's just not 100% in this field. And I think if someone tells you that their success rate is 100%, you should be skeptical. You want your physician to be transparent and honest with you. And if things aren't working, you want your physician to I think it can be easy to be offended because, there's a lot of your personal identity that's wrapped up into this. But I think if things aren't working, me as a patient, I want to hear, okay, this isn't working. What are other options moving forward? And sometimes gestational carrier is an option. Um, it can be tough, especially if things seem like they're normal on paper, but are challenging. It could be a hard thing to hear. But usually I can say, usually when it comes like in these kind of implantation failure cases, sometimes I've done it for recurrent pregnancy loss where the woman gets pregnant, but just has a hard time holding on to the pregnancy. And, there's a standard set of testing you do, but a lot of times you don't get a satisfying answer. And there's a point where it just, keeps happening and we still don't have an obvious explanation. I feel like in these type of cases with implantation failure, recurrent pregnancy loss, things on paper can look pretty normal, good, but it can still be a real challenge. I can say when I brought up a surrogate and patients have moved forward with using a surrogate, I can't remember a situation where it hasn't resulted in a life-born child. So, you know, I think you want your physician to be honest with you. You want to, if things do become challenging, I think ask for their suggestions, even if they're suggestions that might be hard to hear, because sometimes that may be the option you have to explore, to build your family.
Yeah, and when you look at it, really, um, pregnancy is a miracle, and babies are a miracle. Everything has to go right, right? So many things, but there are options. That's the good news. Science has advanced, and there are so many different options out there to build your
Yeah.
family. Doctor, what do you think? What would be your insight or lessons that you've learned when you did your own process that you would like to share with your patients or with anybody listening to us?
I mean, I think that, yeah, it's very rare that there isn't a way for a fertility specialist to help. I think it's more a matter of what are you open to? What are you not open to? And I think that's something maybe early on to kind of take an inventory yourself as a patient and keep that in the back of your mind because there are no guarantees. The success rates can be very good, but sometimes things get tough. And I think having an idea of, where do you draw the line in the sand, and, you know, what are you willing to do? What are you not willing to do is it can help you with your decision making because sometimes sometimes there's lots of different options and deciding what the right one can be a challenge or it may not be something you want to hear. But I think having that kind of personal stock and inventory can help you with those tougher decisions. If things get tough, a lot of time, our success rate in our clinic is really good, but it's not 100% for every single patient. And that's when we start having some of these tougher discussions.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and your professional experience with us. And um, I think it does give us perspective and empathy and in the journey that the patients have to go through to get to their family. Doctor, are just for fun, and to learn a little bit more about you. And I'm gonna cut you off guard, but who is Doctor Maas outside of your job? Uh, Outside of being a husband and a father, what do you enjoy doing
well,
on your time, if you have any?
I don't have a lot, but yeah, I'm a nerd for sure. Uh, I like playing board and card games. I probably the thing, and my wife, she watches this is gonna roll her eyes. She's like, "Oh my goodness." Um, I like uh synthesizers a lot. Like trying to make electronic music, so I have a really big synthesizer collection. I don't really know how to play anything very well. I just find them kind of fascinating. So, uh,
We didn't even fun. Yes.
what else? Yeah, I'd say those are probably the two big things. I like obviously spending time with my kids. I spend a fair amount of time kind of My son's in first grade now, so I'm trying to help him in school and stuff. But I'd say for my free time, it's that. It's the kids are young, so I haven't had a chance to go skiing too much. But I used to like doing cross country skiing a fair amount, and so hopefully as they get older, I'll get them up there a bit with me to try it. We'll see.
Oh, it's crazy. I took my kids to ski here in Maryland, and they separated the adults and the kids. It was my first time skiing up some pro.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Um, it took me a while to get used to it. The kids in 15 minutes, they look like they have been doing this forever. They were getting
So
down
they
to
were
the
naturals, huh?
all of the kids, all of them. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna break a leg. Uh, I mean, I ended up doing it, but it was amazing how resilient and how quickly they can learn. So that's fun. That was fun. I love to hear that you like that.
Yeah. How old are your kids again?
Mine are 8. My daughter is gonna be turn 9 in February. My son is 11. Our son.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Our 3-year-old, we're still a little hesitant to get out there. Maybe in a couple of years we'll try taking them up there. We'll see how it goes.
It sounds fun. And what's your favorite board game?
This will show how nerdy I am. We've been playing a card game, Magic the Gathering, my wife and I, but it's kind of like a fantasy card game. It's almost like I say, like a combination of like strategy, kind of like chess, but
Mm.
kind of with fantasy elements, like Lord of the Rings kind of stuff.
Oh my
So
goodness. I'll have to
yeah,
tell that to my kids. They would love that. My
take a
husband
look.
wants to.
It's a it's a competitive card game. I'm not I don't compete or anything. It's more something that we play, especially when we have friends or family over. That's kind of what we play with them, and usually they really enjoy.
I love learning that about you. You see, that makes a difference also, getting to know who you are as a person and just the day to day, what you do, helping create families and how you enjoy your own. So thank you so much, Dr. Moss, for taking the time today. We know you're busy.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me to speak. I appreciate it.
Yes, and you have a great rest of the day helping build families.
Okay, we will. Thank you.
You have a good day. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.